Legend.
Leader, you are a leader. You are a leader. Rising right up the ranks. You're a leader. Lessons will teach you just how to reach your endless ambitions. Oh yeah. Look at yourself in the mirror. Turn that frown upside down. Show what you're working with. You can't depend on someone else to see your future. That part is up to you. Be a leader.
All right, welcome everybody to Membership and Industry Engagement. Let me start that over because now it's recording. My name is Ramon Lowe, and I am the Director of Membership and Industry Engagement with the Airport Minority Advisory Council. And welcome to Legends and Leapers. And before we get into the program, just a few announcements from the national office. And I did this before. I have a bunch of Post-it notes on my desk so I don't forget what to actually announce. The Econ Forum, an email should have gone out to everyone, hopefully this morning, I believe, with just a recap of everything that went on with our 2024 Economic Opportunity Policy Forum. Thank you to all who attended. Thank you to all the sponsors who helped support the help purchase sponsorships to support financially our conference. And it was basically about 2.5, maybe rounding up to 3 days of really getting into the weeds of our advocacy and making sure that we are always putting that to the forefront of what we do as AMAC and association. So the Econ Forum, for those of you who did not attend, is essentially the live extension of AMAC's advocacy. And I know Najla had attended as well. And it was very, very productive. Got to meet a lot of lawmakers or their staffs and had a lot of great conversations. Again, it's very, very important in terms of making sure that we preserve a lot of the programs that will help our membership base. Again, if we go back to our mission of AMAC, and that's to expand contracting opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. And if you haven't been reading or haven't been seeing in a while, those programs are under attack. So we need to be that heat shield to help preserve those programs. So the Econ Forum review email should have gone out. Hopefully you've read it. And next year, you will choose to attend and join us again. Let's see. The chapters are up and running. If you weren't aware, we have 6 chapters that are stood up. Baltimore, DC, Denver, Chicago, Detroit, LA, and Portland. And soon we'll have Atlanta and Houston. But right now we have 6 chapters that you are able to join. You have to be a member of the national office, meaning having a national membership with AMAC before you can qualify to join one of those chapters. And again, it's $50 per person, per chapter, per year. I strongly urge you to join. It's a great way to network. If you're involved with us nationally, it's a great way to get involved locally. So go to members.amac-org.com to join one of those chapters. Get rid of the Post-it notes. I do want to announce that conference registration and sponsorship portal for the annual Airport Business Diversity Conference is live. Just go to amac-org.com/annual conference. I'm going to put that in the chat here. But if you are not aware, we do have an annual event, and it is basically once a year. We have many events, but this is our tentpole event where we gather all decision makers and executives and folks who operate in this business under one roof for 3, 4, 5 days to network, to learn, and to connect. And this year, in 2024, we're going to be in Nashville. Thank you to Nashville International Airport for your partnership and support. We will be in Nashville August 3rd through the 7th. So a reminder, if you went to San Antonio, which was record crowds, record attendance, we did run out of hotel rooms. So I'm going to say this now, and I said it before. Please make sure you reserve your hotel rooms. But in order to reserve your hotel rooms, you need to register first. So once you register, you can then qualify to go ahead and reserve your rooms. We will have overflow hotels in case our conference hotel does fill up. But you want to be at the conference hotel because that's where all the action is, and that's where all the conversations energy is going to be. So that is another one of the things I want to announce. And last but not least, I know Najla, a Howard alum. I hope she's okay with this, but we have a partnership with Morehouse. I hope there's still love for Morehouse. So we have a partnership with Morehouse to pilot our business capacity accelerator that was announced, I believe, last week, a couple weeks ago, I should say. It's been something that's been in the works for a while. We are very, very proud of it. The business capacity accelerator as a whole is meant to take entry level or new or really on the beginning end of that spectrum as far as people who are looking to get into this business and helping to expand their capacity, help them to get a foundational understanding of what it is to do business in this industry. Now, we will have several components, different components for depending on the category industry that you're in. This one with Morehouse happens to focus on concessions. It's kind of like our legacy. So we will be working with folks who we're accepting applications right now for folks in the Atlanta area who want to participate. So very, very proud of our partnership with Morehouse. So with that, this is, I think, unprecedented. I don't think in my time watching Legends Leapers I've ever witnessed this, but I will be your host today. Unfortunately, Ricky Smith, our chairman, got called away for something professionally, and Miss Lauryn got called away for some personal reasons. So Andrea and Najla are stuck with me, and hopefully I can kind of carry the baton and keep this going. So if you are new to Legends Leapers, this is our monthly virtual chat discussion get together with an industry legend and an industry leaper. And what we try to do is kind of uncover the differences and similarities or learn from the differences and similarities that we might have with folks who might be on totally different ends of their career spectrum. And what ends up happening is, yeah, we have differences. I get it, different experiences, but for the most part, there are some similarities and things that we can all learn from. So with that, I would like to introduce our guest today. Again, I'm reading this from my bio here. Andrea Albo. I'm glad I say Andrea. She is a Denver native and has worked in public service leadership for 24 years in a variety of roles that center on leading large organizations to reform policies, strengthen processes, and improve employee and customer experiences. She currently serves as the Denver International Airport Deputy Chief of Staff, leading a wide range of macro level program and projects related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, primarily the Center of Excellence and Equity in Aviation. Prior to her current role, she served as a Denver Senior Vice President of Culture and Strategy. There, she led precedent-setting work with the Commerce Hub, strategic planning, continuous improvement, wellness, employee engagement, ADA Title VI, workforce development, and equity, diversity, inclusion efforts. Quite a list. Prior to Denver, Andrea was appointed by Mayor Michael Hancock as Chief of Staff for the Denver Sheriff's Department, and where she led large-scale policy operational reform efforts. She spent 10 years with the Denver Department of Human Services in a variety of roles, including Deputy Executive Director, where she led local, state, and federal programs focused on marginalized communities. Andrea has been recognized by the United States Department of Agriculture as a National Champion of Change, a Denver Leader of the Year by the Denver Peak Academy, and other numerous recognitions for her commitment to serving her community. She so holds a BA in psychology from the University of Colorado, Buffs, and is active in supporting community impact efforts, including her current appointment to the Denver Racial Equity Council. Our other guest is our leaper, Najla Haywood. She is a proud third-generation leader of FDY Inc. Now, that's key because we don't see a lot of generational companies more. At least I haven't. So I'm always heartened to see folks that are, kind of carrying the baton for those who kind of started this before us. But FDY Inc. is a food service management company specializing in airport concessions, and they are headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. Founded in 1982, FDY Inc. has evolved from managing university dining programs to operating multiple restaurant brands in multiple airports. Najla joined the company in 2020 and serves as VP and Director of Communications, and her responsibilities include promoting the company's organizational profile through strategic communications and leading the company's strategic growth through business development. Najla is also the founder of the Floyd and Norma Young Foundation in honor of her grandparents and founders of FDY. The foundation provides scholarships and financial assistance to students interested in or currently attending historically Black colleges and universities. Prior to her time at FDY Inc., Najla had a lengthy career in communications and legislative affairs in DC. She served as the communications director for the DC Office of Contracting and Procurement. There, she managed communications and legislative affairs for the District of Columbia's leading procurement agency. She guided small businesses in pursuit of district government contracts, worked closely with local legislators on policy issues, and managed the agency's internal and external communications. She's also served as public affairs specialist for the U.S. Department of Justice office and as public information officer at the DC Office of Employment Services. Najla holds a bachelor's degree in marketing from Howard University, a master's degree in international communication from American University, and a certificate in strategic management from Georgetown University. She serves on AMAC's Emerging Leaders Committee and AMAC's Communications Committee. She's also a proud member, I should add that probably, I'm sure, of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Inc. and the Links Inc. Ladies, we're still in Women's History Month, and thank you for joining us for Legends and Leapers.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for having us. Great to be here today with you all.
So let's crack on, because that was a lot to say, and I would love for you guys to. Everyone wants to hear from you, not from me. And I'll lead off with this, Andrea. How did you find yourself in this space? I know Najla's route is a lot more direct, but how did you find yourself in airports?
It's a great question. You know, I like to start off answering that by saying I'm a social worker that works in aviation, because it really helps to round out just the beginning of my professional career to where I am today. And, you know, I'll tell you, it was definitely not planned. It was something that, as I continued to grow as a leader, as I continued to take risks and put myself in new situations that would help me grow and shape in different ways, it really led me into the wonderful world of aviation. Thank you for reading my long bio. It almost felt like an obituary. I have to work on tightening that up. You know, I started off as a social worker, working for Denver Human Services, just have a passion for people. Public service is just how I'm wired. It's in my DNA. And as I approached multifaceted, really complex systems thinking, I really found a niche in leadership development along those lines. And so that's the common thread across the board that led me into an experience that you all heard as far as law enforcement goes, working with the Denver Sheriff Department, and then led me into aviation, where, you know, we do this level of systems work, systems integration every day in what we do. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Denver Airport, we are a large hub airport. Last year we came in at just about 78 million annual passengers. And so to put that in perspective, we were ranking the third busiest airport in the world for a few years. We're now still in the top 10. We're seeing a lot of passenger traffic pick up in some of the other larger hub airports post-pandemic. But our growth is unprecedented. And so the need for that people level work and that strategic integration is helpful more than ever.
Excellent. So Najla, like I said, I intimated your path seemed a lot more direct, but it's not like you started literally in that row. You kind of like found your way in. Were you always looking to get into the family business, or were you looking to carve your own route?
Good question. I think I always knew that it would somehow happen for me. Things always come full circle. So I anticipated that at some point I would join the family business. I didn't know in what capacity. I didn't know when. But my family encouraged me to, decide what I wanted to do and try new things, and explore a career, that was interesting to me. So that's what I did. It ended up in communications and legislative affairs, which I really enjoyed. But I always had a little, feeling, that kind of your gut is kind of telling you, check in with what's going on at home, just always check in. And, I kind of think I may have waited a little bit too long, because it really took death in my family for me to say, okay, now it's time for me to go. My grandfather, who founded the company, passed in 2019. And as you read in my bio, I joined the company in 2020. So, that was kind of the catalyst for me to say, okay, DC's fun and my career is taking off, but I really need to get back home and help out with the family business. I knew that we had a lot on our plate. I didn't know that COVID was going to happen, but I knew we had a lot on our plate. And then, when I moved literally a week before things shut down in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I didn't know that was happening. So we had a lot on our plate, and then we had a lot more on our plate. So the timing was very interesting for me. But I felt like, if I'm gonna join the company, what a better time to join than when we are, really in the trenches trying to figure out how we're going to make it. And that's exactly, where we were for a while. All of our business is in airports, mainly in Charlotte, Charlotte Douglas International Airport. And so to see passenger traffic just completely stop was terrifying. And I'm sure, Andrea, you probably had similar experiences in Denver. I mean, it was ghost town. So for me, that was extremely terrifying, but it was also, opportunity for me, because it's like, all right, it's your first week on the job. You moved down here from DC, you got to figure it out. Like, what are you going to do? So, there was no direction other than up for me. We had to figure it out, and we came together as a family. And, my colleagues who have been with our company for years, were really, really integral and essential in us, sustaining and being able to, be where we are today. We were very fortunate to not have to lay off any of our salaried managers during that period. We were able to sustain our salaried managers and give them work during that time, even though it was minimal work, because that was something that was extremely important to my father. And I think that for him, that was really the legacy of my grandfather, who, always put his people first. And so we had to make sure that we took care of our people. And that was one of the biggest priorities on my father's mind during that time was, how we have to keep going, because we have, we have team members, we have family members who we have to sustain. So that's what we did. So it took a lot out of me personally, but I think working in such a high pressure environment in DC, being in the political government, public service environment, it's like, you never know what to expect. So I think just having that background, having that training really helps me be able to just jump in where I needed to jump in and, do what I needed to do to help us survive. So it was an interesting journey. Timing was interesting, but I'm still here, still standing. Nothing really bad happened. So
Understood. I'm glad you mentioned COVID, because just in both of your answers, I have a couple things, good questions popping up. Now I see how Lauryn and Ricky do this. You mentioned COVID, and I don't want to focus on COVID specifically, although it can be in part of your answers. There's a saying I read somewhere, or maybe I saw somewhere, that like smooth seas make poor sailors. In other words, we are shaped by our experiences. It's always in the rough, difficult times when we kind of know it reveals who we are, and it teaches us something. So I'd love for you guys to share, maybe a moment that you came across that, like, what, this was difficult. I didn't think, and Najla, you mentioned COVID, maybe it was something else, but maybe there's something that you came across in your lives, or a moment where this is just difficult and you push through, and now you have learnings, as a result. But Andrea, I'll let you start off on that.
I love that question, Ramon. So many moments in my life, and I'm sure Najla can also, relate to, especially the familial aspect of it. So I come from very humble beginnings, and so grit was something that was refined in me from a very young age. Whether it was experiencing homelessness, not knowing, maybe where our next meal was going to come from. It's tough to grow up that way. And so the way that shapes your perspective and how you look at the world is being able to look for a solution when there's very minimal and sometimes no resource. And so it makes you a resourceful person in that sense. And so in the professional sense of things, I've always found myself with these very complex challenges. For better or for worse, it's something that I'm drawn to in terms of problem solving and looking at ways on how to unravel the complexity so we can understand all the pieces and then put it back together in a way that leads to sustainable and, in a lot of ways, cultural changes within an organization. And so, whether it's working in the social work world, we did a lot of reform, especially at the federal level with the food assistance, medical assistance program, implementing the Affordable Care Act under President Obama was a huge milestone and wonderful experience, but it was tough because it meant we had to undo all the old legacy while building and implementing new policy that would have this cascade effect across all 64 counties in Colorado. And then move that similar type of experience over into the sheriff department under massive scrutiny and criticism, rightfully so, terrible situations and murders that had happened at the hands of officers in the department. And that meant we had to completely, top to bottom, reform the organization. That was everything from rewriting use of force policies to making sure that we had new training programs that were more representative of a people-centered approach. So certainly helped sharpen that grit more and more. And then here in the aviation field, as I think about both the pandemic and just the challenges that I mentioned early on with the growth and the unprecedented pace that we're moving here in Denver, it's an everyday tool that we have to use, whether it's looking at space and how to accommodate the growing needs of employees and tenants here that have a presence on our campus, or looking at how we're going to accommodate more flights, concessions, you name it, we've got it. So it's something that I think for those listening and watching, you know, as you approach experiences with whether they're in your personal or your professional life, lean into those spaces. I know it's hard, and sometimes our tendency or our reaction is to run away and protect ourselves, and we should be cautious depending on what it is. But those are the moments, to your point, Ramon, that are going to shape us and help really refine that resiliency that we need to carry forward within ourselves.
So Najla, DC, the DC machine, I'm sure you've probably come across many things that, you know, where you feel like you're being grinded by the gears, and that's probably shaped you. So what has shaped you in terms of like something having to overcome and it's resulted in the person you are today?
Oh, gosh. Everything, everything.
It
I
doesn't have to
think,
be DC. It could be something else. I mean,
yeah,
I just
well, you know,
learning.
honestly, I would say that, you know, from the time I, you know, left my parents' house to go to college, and I was so excited to go to college, but I really, you know, didn't know what to expect. I just like jumped in. And, you know, when I was younger, I was much more fearless. So I was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And, you know, if it's hard, I'll figure it out. And a lot of stuff was hard, and I had to figure it out. And you know, as I entered in my career, and especially, you know, working in DC and different agencies in DC, and you know, just dealing with so many different stakeholders, whether it was, you know, constituents, or, you know, even my colleagues, or you know, council members or congressional members, you know, it was you're getting pulled from left to right with various issues, and having to manage all of those issues and still maintain your sanity and maintain, you know, your values was always challenging. But you know, I feel like every experience, every challenge just has made me the person that I am. I will say though that, you know, looking back through the entire trajectory of my career, the biggest challenge really was my move to Charlotte. And I just think that was timing. I think it was a big jump for me, you know, just to make that big career change. And then also the location change was a jump. So it was already kind of like, oh gosh, am I doing this? Am I doing this? Okay, I'm doing this. And then I did it. And then we entered into the pandemic, and it was really just like, okay, wow, this is a lot. This is a lot of change in a very short period of time for me personally and professionally. Like I've been somewhat in tune with what's going on with the family business, but I haven't been, you know, in the day to day. So I didn't even really have time to learn the day to day before I was trying to figure out, you know, how to fix problems and you know, solve, you know, major issues. And I mean major issues, you know, regarding, you know, our finances and how we were going to sustain. But I kept thinking about the legacy of the company, and the fact that, you know, my grandfather started the company the year before I was born. And I just imagine the number of challenges that he probably had gone through prior to me joining in 2020. And I'm like, well, if he, you know, if he was able to sustain this company for that long, you know, we've got to be able to get through this period of uncertainty, which is the pandemic. And even though we didn't know when there would be an end, we just knew we had to fight. We just had to fight to do it. And so I think, you know, now in 2024, I think that, a lot of my character has been shaped by that experience. I am I was already a tough cookie, but I'm very much more of a tough cookie now. I'm very resilient. There's not a whole lot that's really going to ruffle my feathers. There's really not. Um, People will think, they may say the sky is falling, and I'm like, well, let it fall. Okay. Just what's going to happen at this point? Before we started the call, we were talking about air quality. Look, everything's happening. And most of us have just experienced a lot of change in a short period of time. And we've had to go through quite a bit, whether in our personal lives or professional lives or both, and we're still here. So, I look at myself today versus 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm like, wow, I actually have done quite a bit. And I'm proud of myself. I think I still have a lot more to do and a lot more to learn, but I'm really proud that I've been able to be an asset to my family and to our business, and even to my friends, my personal circle. I think by me jumping out on faith, because literally that's what it was, is jumping out on faith. I think I've shown other people that, look, everything isn't always going to be perfect, and sometimes you are going to jump out on faith, and it's not going to end. It's not going to feel like it's ending well. It's not going to feel like you've landed in a soft place. But that doesn't mean it's over. That doesn't mean that you're not going to turn around and do something amazing with your experience. So I'm excited to see like what I do next. I think every experience, like I said, every professional experience has definitely challenged me, and developed me in some way. And so now I'm always looking for something hard. Like if it's too easy, I'm like, oh, I don't. It's not an issue. Like give me something hard. I want a challenge. I want to see if I can overcome it. So I think now that's where I am career wise, is I'm looking for the hard stuff.
Wow. Okay. I'm just at a different point in my life. I'm like, I just need a little more stability, and but I get
Look,
it. It shapes us, right?
it does. And I mean, I don't want hard stuff all the time, peaks and valleys are fine. But, again, it's just when you experience really tough stuff, and, Andrea, alluded to this with, just the way that she grew up, when you experience really tough stuff, and you overcome it, some things are just, they're, I'm not going to say they're easy, but they're just like, that you're going to overcome it. That you can handle that. That it's not really going to break you. And so, sometimes you might need a little bit of a challenge, just a little something to spice it up and
Oh,
keep you on your
definitely.
toes.
Oh, definitely. I mean, listen, we're in an industry, aviation, but specifically the environment of an airport that is really unlike any other. I mean, I can't, in terms of being fully operational, maybe casinos and hospitals are close being near 24 hours. But the complexity with, it's a secure environment, it's constrained environment. And that's when it's open. I mean, when it's closed, I can imagine when you're opening, you're shuttling product back and forth, just everything that you have to go through. So I can see how that like kind of shapes us to think and maybe take other challenges and say, well, if I can make it here, like they say in New York, if I can make it here, you can make it anywhere. You kind of figure it out. But I do want to say, I do want to talk about growth, and you guys have both intimated a little bit about it. Was there one particular skill that you still lean into now? It could be a soft skill or a hard skill, anything like that, that you have come across throughout your career that you apply daily, to whether it's for yourself or maybe it's the way you kind of lead others, that kind of thing. Is there something that you brought from your professional past, I should say, that you kind of implementing today? And Andrea, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. I love so much of what Najla was talking about, especially around, the familial aspect of how we continue to build upon generational knowledge and experience. We often hear about generational wealth, and I think that education and knowledge and experience is a huge part of growth, because it's not only a reminder of the shoulders that we stand on of our ancestors and the people that have come before us, but it's also that legacy building of thinking about the generations coming behind us. And so when I think about the skills that I bring into my professional space, I think the one that pops up, I mean, there's a long list because God knows I need a huge toolbox every day to get through what, comes our way in the day-to-day of work. That I think it's strategy building. It really is leaning on that problem solving skill. And to Najla's point, I mean, the more complex, the better. It's a challenge. I like to call it leveling up, right? It's how I challenge myself, but challenge others, because at the end of the day, we are public servants. That's the governance here at Denver Airport. We're part of the local city mayoral council government. And so we are here to serve the community, and it is our responsibility to shape that in a way that not only is meeting and hopefully exceeding customer experience and the community demand, but it's also building a path so that as that future workforce is coming through, whether it's today, tomorrow, 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, they can see the path that we've shaped and that strategy building and how we have planned things out, and then continue to build upon that, knowing that it's going to shift and ebb and flow in the way that we do our work. But that is so powerful. And the more that I think we can pass on that type of skill to the incoming and future workforce, the better. Because I will tell you, with things changing constantly, like technology, even just think about artificial intelligence, AI, right? The way that it's now showing up in our work, whether you're going through TSA security screening, and now you don't even have to show your ticket for most places. You just stand in front of the camera and there it is. Move on to the next step. I think it's something that we really need to think about, and how that is going to continue to transform the work that we're talking about, especially from an equity perspective. For folks that don't have access to technology, we often hear about food deserts. There are digital deserts out there where people don't even have Wi-Fi or access to the internet. And so how are we bringing people along with us? And how do we use that strategy building skill to create a plan that accounts for giving everyone an opportunity to connect?
Najla?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Andrea said. I think my skill, it's a gift and a curse, but I am very much an introvert, although people don't always believe me, but I am a listener. So, I may be in a room and the conversation, may be very dynamic, and there may be opinions going left and right, and I'm just listening. And in some cases, people think I'm not engaged, but I'm listening and I'm forming, my thought process. I'm thinking strategically about whatever the issue is at hand. I'm listening to, what information is being presented in the room. And then I'm thinking back on previous experiences, things that I may have read or things that I may have heard from other, colleagues or peers, and thinking about how I can apply that information to a solution. So it's really, I think it boils down to being a really good listener, but also a strategic listener. And then once you've heard all this information, being able to act on it in a very strategic way. And I think that a lot of people have different processes, right? And so some people don't understand my process, and I think it kind of some people are like, wait, are you paying attention? Are you listening? Yeah, I'm listening. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. It's going to come to me. But I take all of my experiences. I take all of the things that I've heard. I take things that I've read, white papers that I've read, or, webinars that I've been on. And I try to apply those things to real life. So if there's an issue at hand, I'm not just going to come off the cuff and say, I think we should do X, Y, Z because I think it's the right thing to do. I want to give some context to that. I want to come with some foundational, knowledge or reasoning why I'm suggesting certain things. So for me, that's, probably the biggest strength or tool that I tend to use. And I think as I grow in my career, I lean into that even more. I'm a lot more confident in that than I was my earlier days of my career. I know what my process is now. I know kind of the timing that I need, especially if it's a complex situation, because ultimately, I want to create a solution that is not just a one and done solution, right? I want to create a solution that is sustainable, that
Gone.
is,
Keeps going,
yeah,
continue.
it's sustainable. It's something that can last, multiple legacies if that's what it needs to be. It's something that can be, transferred into other aspects of our business. So, I don't make decisions quickly. I try to make them strategically. And I guess that's a little bit of strategic thinking too. But I just think it's so important, especially in this ever-changing environment that we're in. To points that have already been made, aviation is really, it's a microcosm of, I think, the world, in a small space. When you're in an airport, everything is happening in that airport, and passengers don't know that. I think people come into the airport and get on their flight. They have no idea, what's going on behind the scenes. There's so much going on behind the scenes, whether you are an airport director or a concessionaire or, you're working for TSA. There's just so much going on behind the scenes. And so we have to be alert and aware of that. And you have to be thinking about all of those things when you're making decisions that impact your business, decisions that impact, your customers, decisions that impact your stakeholders. So if I'm making a decision for, one of my restaurants, I know that it's not necessarily just going to impact my restaurant, right? Like it's going to impact the brand, it's going to impact the airport that we're in. It's going to impact, the city that we're in, right? So, you have to be thinking, larger sometimes. And for me, sometimes it takes me a minute to really get all those thoughts together, and to really process that. And yes, to the comment, I agree.
I think
um,
I'm sorry to cut you off. I think one of the things that you've mentioned, I do want to, I was going to go in a certain way, but you mentioned leadership. And regardless of where we are, we're leaders, whether you are given the title or not. And I know for me, and I'm still learning this, I wasn't ever a great leader. And I used to think leading is I tell you what to do and you do it. That was the extent of it. But that's how I grew up. Anyway, um, I do want to ask, like, who or what has shaped your leadership style or how you approach folks? And it could be, and I think I'm kind of delving into the mentor, but I'd love to hear a little bit about who or what has shaped that and what you do in your own to kind of help propel, those learnings to the next gen. And I'll go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, mentors, such a critical part of the journey, right? The people that pour into us, that see things in us that sometimes we don't even see in ourselves, but they see this little seed that's planted and they nurture that for us. It's so powerful. So many mentors that I could think of throughout my career. Even folks that are not in the traditional sense, right? Folks that are maybe not in the realm of having a big title or being in a big position or role, but teach you things that carry you forward and shape you into the person that you are. I would say, in my career, watching and observing mentors in action, one of the most powerful things that I've experienced is when people care enough to tell you the hard things that most people aren't willing to do because either they just don't want to hurt your feelings or maybe they're holding back for whatever reason. Knowing that someone cares enough to say, hey, you've got some mud on your face, or you might need to think about this a little differently in the way that you're approaching it, because here's how it's coming across. Might not be your intent, but here's how it's coming across. It's so powerful. And it might sting a little bit, but that's when you're growing, right?
And it
And
does take a deft hand
it
to
does.
deliver that message. Hey,
It
this is what
really
you're doing
does.
wrong, as opposed to this is what you're doing wrong.
Exactly. And like giving you that space to reflect and to really think about what that feedback means, right? It's one thing for someone to tell you, hey, you should do this a different way. But it's another thing for somebody to ask you a thought-provoking question that yields insight into what's happening inside yourself of my intent is this, but if I'm way over here and not even in the realm of trying to like get to the heart of what I'm trying to accomplish, I need to think about that, right? No one can do that for me, but having someone prompt that thought-provoking conversation inside yourself is so incredibly powerful. In fact, I oftentimes will call up one of my mentors and say, okay, I'm having that moment, like where, you kind of feel stuck, or you're in that like brain fog of like, gosh, why does it feel like I'm chasing my tail, or why can't I solve this problem? It just keeps coming back and keeps coming back. I need you to ask me a hard question, is usually how I start that conversation. I need you to ask me a hard question. And more often than not, it helps me break through whatever that fog is and get to maybe not the final solution, but at least start to see again that strategy forming and what that path ahead might look like. The other thing that I think is so incredibly powerful with mentoring is becoming a mentor. I cannot tell you how much I have learned from mentees that I've worked with. And again, thinking about generational changes and shifts and what's motivating people, I can tell you right now, the incoming workforce and the workforce of the future is motivated by very different things than the workforce today. And we are in a very unique place in our world where we have multi-generations in the workforce all at once. From baby boomers all the way to, what is it, Gen Alpha or whatever the new one is. I have a hard time keeping up with it sometimes. But it's all different and it's a big range. And so as we think about, passing that torch and imparting that knowledge as mentors into mentees, or we're still learning from, and rightfully so, mentors in our space, all of that is culminating into how it's shaping the way we leave an impression on the organization we're with, the people that we work with, and setting that example that this should be mentoring, and mentorship should be part of the day-to-day life of any professional setting.
Najla?
I think I've learned from, every one of my previous bosses or supervisors in the past. I've learned, what worked and what didn't work. And I've taken those experiences and those relationships that I've had and used those throughout my career, to manage my own leadership style. As much as I hate 360 feedback, that's like the best feedback you can get, right? And so whenever, it's time for those 360 evaluations, I'm like, oh, here we go. But that, experiencing that, going through that process, I've been able to pick up on things about my style or my, my leadership style that I wouldn't have picked up on, honestly, that I thought, nobody was paying attention to, or that didn't really matter, that nobody, really had any response to. So, I've combined, I guess, my experience with my previous supervisors, plus the feedback that I've gotten from people that I have supervised, and tried to just, go back to the golden rule of treating people the way that I would want to be treated, but also acknowledging some of my own pitfalls, some of my own weaknesses and areas of opportunity and growth that I know I need to work on, and trying to just, build through that. I know, every now and then I'll reach a point in my, day to day where I'm just like, I'm stuck. I don't know, how to respond to this. I don't know how to solve this issue. And I keep one of John Maxwell's books, like right behind my desk, the 21 Indispensable Qualities of a Leader. And it's just a very small, basic book, but I can kind of open that book and just kind of like search through the pages and find something that may be relevant to whatever issue I'm going through. And, sometimes that just sparks something in me and I say, okay, this is how I'm going to tackle this issue. So I think I get inspiration from a lot of different sources of my life, whether it's, people that I know, or books, or, feedback that I've gotten from, people that I've worked with in the past. I would say that, leadership is a huge task and a huge responsibility. And I don't think that there is a one size, fits all approach to leadership. I think it really depends on the situation that you're in and who you're leading, right? So like, coming from, working in public service in Washington, D.C., the people that I supervise are very different than the people that I'm supervising now, who are, maybe just an hourly, worker in one of my restaurants, who really could care less about, like leadership development. or growing, they really just need like a part-time job. So my approach to leadership is very different depending on who I'm interacting with. And I'm always learning from, whatever situation is at hand. I don't always know the answers. And one of the things that I have no problem saying is, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I will try to find out for you, or, we'll try to figure this out together. I think that shows a little bit of humility with, whoever you're dealing with. When you say you don't know because you really don't know, I think people can appreciate that and respect that and say like, okay, this person is genuinely not going to just make up something or tell me a lie. Like they're actually, honest about where they are. So, I think it's just a combination of experiences that I've had in my past. But like I said, I always go back to the golden rule. I just try to treat people the way I would want to be treated. I've had bosses that were like really harsh and, mean to me. I learned from them. I learned a lot from them. But, I think approaches could have been a little bit different. So I try not to do that. But I also, I try not to be like a super easy, just like everything's fine kind of boss. Like I'm going to challenge you. But again, the approach is different depending on the situation and who I'm leading. Um, and I agree that mentorship is key. Being able to, talk to somebody outside of your, professional environment, maybe somebody that really doesn't know the ins and outs. I like to say like a neutral third party about a situation also helps because, they're not in the day to day, but you can kind of address or approach them with an issue or a problem and get their opinion on how, how they would solve it, or, maybe something similar that they've experienced in their past. And that can also give you guidance and, education on how you might want to approach something in the future. I think that there's always some, a source of inspiration, a source of guidance when you're seeking, mentorship or leadership. And sometimes you get guidance and leadership from people that you would least expect it. Somebody tells you something and you're like, wow, that actually, I'm going to try that next time, So I'm always open to feedback, open to, hearing what others recommend or suggest. And if I need to switch something up because something's not working, I'm going to do that. I'm fine with that. I think, it's just important to show up as your true self, no matter the situation,
Well, I'm glad that you
whether
mentioned.
you're personal or professional.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned books because I'm happen to be staring at one right now. And there's this book I read a long time ago called Range by David Epstein. It's actually a pretty good book. And the premise of it is it's three things really. One, as we are finding ourselves throughout the world, we're acquiring skills and through our experiences. That's one. And basically the book is about how generalists are going to take over the world versus specialists. So we should work on our breadth of skills versus the depth of our skills. Because the moment you only do one thing, and that one thing's gone, you're left with nothing. So, and also at the same time, there's stories that are told in terms of, and I thought of both of you, where they might have started out in one thing. I think one person was a pianist and ended up being an accountant because he didn't know he had like this latent superpower with math or whatever. And so he tried a variety of things over the course of his career. They were all different skills until he found one where he fit. But at the same time, there were other stories where they acquired all these skills that now I have to apply to, to certain things. So anyway, Range by David Epstein is a good book. I think you should pick it up. There's two things I do want, my just last two questions I wanted to share with both of you. One of them I'm always very, very interested in. Being the positions that we hold in our careers, it has to do with imposter syndrome. So we get to a point where we're hired to do a job or we're promoted to a position and we think, I got this. I know it. It's easy, right? Even though I've never been given a recipe or what have you. But would love for you to kind of share, Andrea, just like an instance of, have you ever felt that way? Or like, am I qualified to do this? I'm just going to fake it till I make it. Or, Najla said, I just be honest. I don't know it, but Have you kind of come across that in your career?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the starts and stops of, you know, moving between industries has certainly brought imposter syndrome in every experience. You know, whether it's starting out my career and stepping into a professional space for the first time and thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm in this big world and all this responsibility, and am I good enough? Am I going to be able to keep up? Will I be able to do all the things that are expected of me? To then changing, you know, into a completely different industry twice over, and having to learn and come into an organization where there, especially both in law enforcement from a gender perspective, there are very few women. It's more of like an 80-20 split, male dominated. And then in aviation, as I'm sure you all know, very white male dominated. And so from both a race and gender perspective, you know, you're battling walking into a room where you're one of few or the only. And so again, I lean on that grit to remind me that even though I may not be feeling worthy, or I may not be feeling that sense of belonging because I'm stepping into a zone that is unfamiliar, and quite frankly, because this is life, right, might be bumpy. The environment might be rejecting you. It might be, you know, actively working against you being successful for whatever reason. And so it makes imposter syndrome that much easier to creep in and try to start taking over, you know, the way you show up as your authentic self. And what I say to that is phooey, right? You are worthy, you are good enough, and you are there for a reason because you worked your tail off to get there. And so trust yourself, remind yourself of how far you've come, you know, whether you're just starting off or whether you're 10, 20, 30 years into your career, you have something to contribute. And I think when we do that, and it's not easy. So I'm not trying to pretend like I've got this all figured out, because there are still moments where I might walk into a room, or I might be in a situation where it's like, me? You want me to do that? Wow. I don't know. I don't know if I'm the right person. But that goes back to something I mentioned earlier. Lean into those places that are uncomfortable, because that's when you're growing. We don't grow when it's comfortable. That's easy. You don't even have to think about it. It's second nature. But when you feel that thing in the pit of your stomach start to bubble up and you're like freaking out a little bit, that's growth, people. So embrace it and use that as the fuel to propel you not only through that moment in that situation, but as a reminder that you can do anything. You really can. It's a mental exercise of making sure that you have those reminders, which is why I love things like meditation. Medication sometimes works too. The little Freudian slip there. Meditation practices, mindfulness, whatever you want to call it, prayer. I lean a lot on my spirituality to make sure that I am reminding myself in those hard moments of who I am, how far I've come, and what I'm capable of. And there's nobody like you. We are all unique in our own right? There is no duplicate of any one of us, which means we all have something different to contribute to any given situation. And so when you feel that imposter syndrome start to creep up, pause, reflect, re-energize, and power through.
Najla?
Yeah, I'm over here taking the wisdom. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I definitely have experienced imposter syndrome, and it's especially changing, you know, careers and changing agencies over the years. You know, you definitely feel that when you walk into the door of a new office and you have this responsibility. And I think, you know, even and to this day, you know, I walk into certain meetings and I'm like, I guess I'm supposed to be here, but I don't know if I really have value to add. And then I, you know, start getting into whatever the context is, the subject matter is, and I'm like, oh, I have a lot of value to add. I got plenty of stuff to add, you know. So I think it's a little bit of, you know, it's imposter syndrome, but sometimes it's just a little bit of like nervousness, or, you know, maybe you're just feeling a little bit of shyness. But I think, you know, the biggest part about imposter syndrome for me is that it is temporary. It is a fleeting moment, a fleeting thought, right? And I can't let it simmer. I can't sit in it. I have to move past it because there's work to do. There are, um, people who depend on, me sustaining the business, for their paychecks, right, to sustain their families, right? So I don't have time really to be,
So,
know,
yeah.
afraid or, feeling less than. Like I've got a job to do. And so that's really what I focus on. It's like I'm in the room because I got to get something done, whatever that is, whether I feel like I'm supposed to be here or not, I'm here for a reason. And so that's really kind of how I turn it around in my mind. Is like, look, you're here for a reason. If the meeting is an hour, you can sit in here for an hour and you can get whatever needs to get done and move on to the next thing. I think it's just really important, when I'm talking to women that are younger than me, who are, kind of starting to experience imposter syndrome. I just try to tell them, look, it's temporary. Do not lean into it, because if you lean into it and you treat it as if it is always going to be a part of your life, always going to be a part of your professional life, then it will be. So you've got to just kind of like, think about it and move on.
Basically, the task,
Shake it
the
off,
task
shake it
and-
off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shake it off,
basically
right?
the task and responsibility is what pulls you out. Like I have no time to kind of sit here and fret because I have so many people that are
Yeah.
reliant on me for doing this. So I got to put my feelings aside. Maybe it's
Yeah.
afterwards, then you kind of like you go home. I don't know. I cry into a pillow or maybe
Yeah. Well, I
pop
mean,
a bottle of wine
I
or
think,
something.
yeah, I think to a certain extent, I mean, not to turn it into like a super terrible thing, but it is a little bit of selfishness because you're really you're thinking about yourself and whether or not you should be in a space, right? As opposed to thinking about the space and thinking about the other people that might be in the space and what you can contribute to them, right? So when you walk into a room, yeah, you might be a little bit timid and feeling like you shouldn't be there, but what value do you add to the other people in the room? What do they get from you? What can you share with them? Like you've got to approach it as if you are the prize, really. You've got something to give. And, if you think of it that way, it really does help to shake off the imposter syndrome. If you think about like, I can I can give something of myself to somebody else. So I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to be shy. I don't need to be afraid. I'm not an imposter. I'm showing up because I have something to give. I have something to share, or I have something to learn.
That's right.
Cool. So my very last question, because I know we're up on everyone's time, is so I'm a girl dad and I'm a mama's boy, and this is Women's History Month. So I would like for each of you to kind of share what are you doing to mentor that next group, behind you. And again, we talked about mentorship earlier, and to me, mentorship isn't just I'm giving you a blueprint of what to do. I mean, it's something that you can observe in another person that you probably adapt. I think you guys have mentioned that. So I'd like for you guys to share, each of you, what you're doing purposefully to really train and uplift those behind you in the ladder and in their careers, I should say. Andrea, sorry.
One of the greatest feelings that I've ever experienced as a leader is watching and being part of creating new leaders. When we pour into someone and you see them reach their goal, whether it's by, a promotion and going into a new position, or it could be, just achieving a personal goal that they've set for something. It's so powerful. And so what I really try to do is a few things. One, making sure that I'm sharing my story. I remember, very early on in my career, I would look at especially women of color, in high level positions, and I would think, oh my gosh, like they must have this like perfect.
Whoop. I think we lost Andrea.
Oh no.
That's unprecedented. All right, hopefully she'll find her way back in. But I'll throw it to you, Najla. So what are you working on your end to kind of like set blaze trails or leave crumbs, for the next?
need crumbs. I'm active. I'm very active in my community, and I think for me that really helps to, I guess, maintain my sanity, because I really can get caught up in work life, and other, personal problems or whatever. So by being active in my community, I get to, like, not think about me and think about others. And being active in the community, mentorship has just become part of that. Working with, high school age girls, which are my favorites. And I honestly, I present myself as a mentor to them, but I swear they are mentors to me. I learn so much from them, and I think it's become um, almost an even exchange. They ask me a lot of questions about, where I went to college, and my job now, and things, like how did you like school, or how did you do this, or how did you do that? Um, and I answer those questions, but when it gets down to the nitty gritty of, well, how did you feel about an experience that you had? Those to me are very even experiences and even exchanges. I've had recently, some really interesting conversations around mental health. And I found that some of the younger generation, they're much more tapped into their mental health and mental well-being than I certainly was when I was that age. So, I appreciate that openness and willingness to have those conversations. And so what I can share with them is, how being tapped in and paying attention to it early will help to benefit them in the future as they make decisions, for their careers. I find that I gain so much from those types of relationships. So it's probably a little selfish, but I think, mentorship is certainly a two-way street. I think I just gain so much, and they probably gain, stuff from me that I just, don't think is that big of a deal. But I think, it's just being able to have a conversation with somebody that's younger than me, and they can ask me any questions, and I can ask them, any questions, and we can just have a conversation and a dialogue. I don't necessarily have or want or force, I guess, create formalized relationships with them. I like to keep it just very open, and reach out to me if you got an issue. If you don't have an issue, it's fine. And I think creating a level of comfort around just my presence, my being, has been really beneficial to me. I enjoy knowing what the conversations are and what the issues are that young women are having these days. Are they similar to what I went through when I was younger? Are they different? And like I said, I'm just so impressed by the emotional intelligence that I've experienced with some of the young girls that I've worked with. Andrea's
Andrea's
back.
back.
I'm so
Perfect
sorry,
timing.
my internet connection just went kaput.
It's okay. It's that Denver weather. I get it.
It is, I know, the turbulence.
No, but we were just wrapping up, and what I do want to say is, thank you both for doing this. I know it was a bit of a tight turnaround, and thank you for putting up with me. I know it was my first time doing this. Hopefully, it was a great experience. I do want to thank everyone in the audience that has stayed on. Hopefully, you were able to glean. I was just texting Andrea. I'm like, oh, we need to have another conversation because I have so many more questions to ask each of you. But maybe we'll have that in person at the conference in Nashville on August 3rd to the 7th. We'll do that.
That'd be
So
wonderful.
once again,
Thank you.
yeah, once again, thank you both for coming on, and have a great, blessed and safe week, and hopefully we'll connect soon. Take care.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.